Dangerous? You know what's dangerous, Mr. Stafford? Inaction and indecision. That's what's dangerous. Welcome to episode number 8. And the title of today's show is Danger. Today's quote comes from the movie Hidden Figures. After I left the movie Hidden Figures, it instantly became my favorite movie. I loved everything about this movie. The writing, the acting, the soundtrack. To me, everything about this movie was perfect. Every actor that played in this movie played their roles perfectly. This week's quote is a great quote, but to be perfectly honest, today's quote is really an excuse for me to talk about the movie Hidden Figures. I love that movie so much. For those of you who are not familiar with the movie, it is primarily based on the true story of female black mathematicians who served a key role in NASA during the early years of the U.S. space program. 3 women in particular were the primary focus of the movie. Katherine G. Johnson, played by Taraji P. Henson. Dorothy Vaughan, played by Octavia Spencer. And Mary Jackson, played by Janelle Monáe. All of those women, they had such a perfect, what's the word I'm looking for? A perfect synergy working together in that movie. All of the characters had a perfect synergy in that movie. The character played by Kevin Costner was just perfect. I don't think he could have done that character any better than he did it. Everyone in that movie did such a great job. It like I said earlier, it instantly became my favorite movie of all time because it's such an inspirational movie. I'm not an emotional person, and I almost cried several times in this movie. The first scene that almost brought me to tears involved Taraji P. Henson and Kevin Costner. And from now on, pretty much I'm going to refer to the actors as opposed to the real people that they were portraying in the movie. Just to make it easier. This scene, Taraji P. Henson's character worked in a building during the movie that did not have a restroom for colored women. So she had to go to another building somewhere else on the plant to actually just use the restroom. So her character would have to go at certain times of the day. Obviously, unless you're superhuman, you have to go use the restroom every now and then. And she would have to do that. So at one particular point in this particular scene in the movie, Kevin Costner was looking for her and he couldn't find her. And he was like, wow, where is she? And he was very upset. So when she came back and to set up this particular scene, when she went to the restroom that day, it was raining outside. And so by the time she got back to the office, she was drenched in water. So that's when Kevin Costner confronted her about where does she go every day? What are you doing? Why are you away from your desk so much? And that scene is one of the best scenes I've ever seen in a movie. Prior to that, I probably would have said the scene in the movie A Few Good Men where Tom Cruise is talking to Jack Nicholson and he's trying to get Jack Nicholson to admit that he ordered the code red in that movie. If you're familiar with that movie, you know what I'm talking about. That particular scene. And that to me was probably one of the best scenes I had ever seen in a movie. But this particular scene here, I think, is my favorite now. After he confronted Taraji P. Henson, what's the way to describe this? Again, remember the time they were in. They were in the 1960s, and there were colored-only fountains, colored-only restrooms, white-only fountains, white-only restrooms. So this was a difficult time, and anything that you do that was perceived as disrespectful or, something of that nature probably could get you fired in your job. So that scene portrayed her with so much emotion and so much anger, but yet she did it in a way that wouldn't cause her to lose her job. It was just a brilliant scene. You just have to see the movie and see that scene to see her response to Kevin Costner. And one of the things that she actually said to him, and I'm going to try to do it a little bit like she did, but here's what she said. Here's just a little snippet of what she said. And I work like a dog day and night, living off coffee from a pot that none of you want to touch. Of course, I'm not doing it any justice, but you just have to see that scene. It's my favorite scene, I think, now of all time in a movie. And then after she told him what she was feeling, she just politely turned around, walked out, politely closed the door, and went, and I guess she had to go do something else. You know, you don't know in the movie what she actually done, but of course she had to leave for something. That was just a brilliant scene, acted perfectly by Taraji P. Henson. The next scene that almost brought me to tears was the scene that followed directly after that one. And it was where Kevin Costner in the movie went to tear down the sign that said colored women's restroom. And he took a crowbar to that sign and tore that sign down. Very emotional scene. And when he got done and he was walking away, he said, "Here at NASA, we all pee the same color." Such a brilliant line, such a great movie. And I love that particular quote, but I can't think of anything where I can use that quote in any episode or anything like that. But if I could, I would have. Terrific line in that movie. This film dealt with a very difficult subject from a very difficult time in the U.S., legalized systematic institutional bigotry and racism. And they made a feel-good movie with that very difficult subject. To me, the fact that they were able to do that with that subject is a tribute to the three women that the movie is primarily about: Katherine Johnson, Dorothy Vaughan, and Mary Jackson. This is a must-see movie. I don't care who you are. This movie can be inspirational to you. Can have you feeling like I was feeling when I walked out of the movie, feeling like I could do anything, I can accomplish anything. And the reason why I guess it's touched me so much, considering that it made me feel that way, is the fact that there's so many things, different projects that I'm working on now that I want to get done. And some of them, you know, you have a little, I'm just being honest, you have a little fear. You know, is it going to work? How am I going to do this? How am I going to do that? And when I walked out of that movie, I was walking like I was 10 feet tall. I just loved that movie. It's a great movie. You have to actually go see that movie. Okay, now to the actual quote that we're dealing with this week that came from the movie. The scene in the movie that the quote comes from is the scene where the NASA administrator, the head of NASA at that particular time in the 1960s, played by Ken Strunk, and some of the engineers had just watched a newsreel of the Soviet Union beating the U.S. into space. After they finished looking at this newsreel, one of the characters played by Jim Parsons, with the lead engineer in the movie, he basically said, that doesn't seem like it's too dangerous to me that they made it to space before us. And then the character, the NASA administrator, played by Kevin Strunk, basically lost his mind. And that's when he said the quote that we're dealing with this week. Dangerous? You know what's dangerous, Mr. Stafford? Inaction and indecision. That's what's dangerous. And the reason why that spoke to me so much, because so many times in our lives, so many times in my life, you have those periods where you're frozen in inaction because of fear, because of waiting on timing to be perfect for whatever it is that we're trying to do. We get frozen by that, and we don't actually do what we should do at the time that we should do it because we're waiting on the perfect moment. I know that's happened to me. And if it's happened to you, you can use this quote to help you, to kick you, to I won't not say kick you, but to push you to do what it is that you're dreaming of doing, that you have a goal that you want to do. There is a great book that deals with this subject by Stephen Pressfield. And the name of the book is Do the Work. I probably, and I bought the audiobook. I've mentioned before, I tend to prefer audiobooks. And I must have listened to that audiobook at least 10 times by now. Great book in encouraging you to not be frozen, to encourage you, to push you to get started. Terrific book. When you find a great book or a great audiobook, it's a good idea to read it multiple times or listen to it multiple times in the case of an audiobook to get that ingrained in you. And one thing that I'm going to start doing especially with audiobooks, I'm going to journal the book. As I'm listening to the book, write down the key points that really speak to me and just keep a journal of those great books like that. It's a terrific thing that you can do. So the admonition for this week's episode is for us to remember what's dangerous, and that is inaction and indecision. Please subscribe to this podcast and please keep coming back again and again. And always remember this: quotes don't work unless you do.